So I've always thought that if someone had a successful Kickstarter campaign, they would have a successful game. But guess what? There's no actual information on the internet. I couldn't find anything anywhere until now. I went through thousands of successful Kickstarter campaigns, and using a bit of a metric, I worked out if they were successful games. So that's what this video is all about. If you are successful at Kickstarter, is your game going to be successful? I think the results will surprise you. I have broken this video down into 5 sections. It's going to be why is this information important? I'm going to go through the criteria that I used to actually determine if a game was successful or not successful. Then I'm going to show you the data that I got from this. Then the conclusion, why all these things happened and what we can learn from all this. This is a bit of a big video. Let's get a coffee and get through this. Why did I do this? As you know, we are making a game, Lighthaze World, and every indie developer seems to go through this process of we make a game, then when the game gets halfway through, go to Kickstarter, and we decide we need funding to make a successful game. I was at this point where I thought, do I need Kickstarter to make a successful game? And when you look on the internet, if you go to places like Kickstarter, they have all these statistics that don't ever seem to make a whole lot of sense. I particularly like how Kickstarter implies almost half the games are actually funded, because they say 35,000 games were funded, and they also say that 39,000 games were unsuccessful. And whilst this is true, they don't give you one important factor. This statistic does not show how many Kickstarter campaigns were cancelled. It doesn't show the cancelled number, because everyone that tells you how to make a successful Kickstarter campaign says it is better to cancel than to be unsuccessful. I've backed 10 projects. 3 were successful, 3 were unsuccessful, and 4 were cancelled. And when I talk to most of my friends, they would agree that somewhere between a third and half of their games were cancelled, probably looking at 50,000 games that were cancelled. I was no closer to working out if I was going to do a Kickstarter campaign. I started going through every project that was on Kickstarter that was successful, but I needed a criteria of how I would determine what games were successful and what games were not successful, what games broke even. So I decided to break down each game into 5 possible categories. Not finished was campaigns that were still look like they were trying to complete the process of supplying a game to the people that had backed them on Kickstarter. Never released means the game was cancelled and never delivered. Unsuccessful, break even, and successful was where I had to use the Steam page or wherever the game had ended up to determine if it was a successful game or not. To do this, I went to Steam on each project. It said that between 3 and 10% of people will comment on a game after they purchase it. So I went with the highest thing to give every chance of success. So for example, if a game had 50 reviews, then I would assume that 500 people had a copy of this game on Steam, which means if you times that by the amount that the game is, then you would get a figure of $7,500. But then if you go back to Kickstarter and you see that they had $9,000 worth of revenue generated on Kickstarter, you know that they actually have given away probably every single game that was on Steam. And you know that they've probably actually never made any money from Steam. They've probably been all keys that have been given away. So basically you could assume that the project never made any money from Steam. So I would deem this break-even game. So then in doing that, I could determine if a game had basically just probably paid for itself, which is a break even, and if a game had been successful on Steam, or if a game had been unsuccessful on Steam by the lack of sales compared to its Kickstarter campaign. And I do understand that some people wanted to make something and they might deem that as successful, but I'm looking at this as a money making exercise. And then we had a whole heap of data. So let's go through that and see what games were successful. Kickstarter has 5 different categories. So I broke everything down into those categories as well. We will start with the less than 1,000. 41% were unsuccessful and 39% were never released. 80% of those games did nothing. And only 1% of this category was actually successful. Pretty damning. The other part was, it's probably no surprise that 85% of these games had less than 50 people make a pledge to their Kickstarter campaign. In the 1,000 to 10,000 category, 42% was unsuccessful. 21% was never released. That's quite damning again. We're not doing very well in these lower categories for people actually being successful. There was a 5% success rate in this category, which was better. We are getting a little bit better there. And again, the backers obviously grew as you needed more money, you got more backers. So it had the more backers in the 50 to 200 backing range. Then you go to 10,000 to 100K. I thought that this was where we were going to see more success, to be honest, and really we didn't. Nearly 50% was unsuccessful games that came out of this category, but we did get 9% successful. So the break even was a bit higher here with 14%. So we definitely got more people kind of like, they were almost successful. And then obviously, the amount of backers needed to get this money increased again. You had 56% was 200 to 1,000 backers, and then 42% was 1,000 to 5,000 backers. 100K to the 1 million. And this is where you're definitely expecting successful games because they had a lot of money. So you just assume that it was going to be all good stuff. 34% unsuccessful. 21% never released. That's over 50% of these games were no good. But we did get 22% successful games in this. So we are growing that successful section, and there was less break-evens. And as you expect, the amount of backers really went up. So then we look at the million plus, the big ones out of all of it. And I thought, I don't know why I kept on thinking, help kickstart my YouTube with a subscribe. 13% successful, 38% were unsuccessful, and 25%, a quarter of all of these games that got $1 million were never released. There was only 60-something games in this category. To think that 16, 17 games never got released and they made that much money, that is just crazy. 100% of these had more than 5,000 backers. When we pop it all together and we look at it all together, 44% of all games on Kickstarter are unsuccessful after being successful at their Kickstarting campaign. 44%, nearly half of all games are never successful. 21% are not finished at this stage, and 17% are never finished. Only 7% of all Kickstarter campaigns are actually successful. Now that is really, really low. So I'm going to go into reasons why this happened in a second. The majority of these campaigns had about 200 to 1,000. So why did they fail? Why was so many unsuccessful Kickstarter campaigns that had made so much money? A small percentage, if you remember back in the old days, when Steam had Greenlight. Some of these projects got a successful Kickstarter campaign, but then they never got greenlit on Steam, had nowhere to go. I wonder if you give away a huge chunk of Steam games, if this actually hurts your promotion on Steam, because Steam aren't making money from free keys. It's like people have got the money from Kickstarter, but then not converted that into Steam sales. A lot of these projects took 3 years to complete. I've been to many shopping centers, and I know that if there's somebody lined up to go and get something and they have to wait for more than 3 seconds, they're going to get angry. If you go and have a look at a lot of these campaigns that had lots of people involved, you have a lot of angry people that have given their money to something. Yes, they should know that it's a Kickstarter campaign. Yes, they should know that it can take some years to develop. They are people that want their product, and they are trying to make these developers work to the bone to get their product that they paid for. A lot of these Kickstarter campaigns went with words of the spiritual sequel to a game. If I said I'm making the spiritual sequel, then people are excited. They're like, oh yes, I always wanted this game to get made. Why didn't Nintendo do that back in the day? There is a problem here though. My experience with that game is different to your experience with that game. And I'm not the original developer. I'm just a developer making something to fill this void that sequel that never got released was. People that have put money into this Kickstarter are not getting the product that they think they were going to get. There was so many negative comments about so many games. And because people have given their money early, they are expecting a product. As soon as that product doesn't turn out to be what they expected it to be, they turn really hard, really fast. There was so many games on Steam that were destroyed from negative comments because this spiritual successor of a game did not live up to their expectations. If you want to go and have a look at some of these Kickstarter game campaigns, it is quite depressing. It's not a good place to be. I don't think it helps a creative mindset. So if you are still keen on doing a Kickstarter campaign, there are some things I did learn. You need your game to be able to be released within a year of the Kickstarter campaign. The successful projects all released within a smaller window. This way, the community did not turn on the developers. It did not go after a witch hunt. There was no anger. They were like, yeah, we got the product, it's cool. You definitely need to be clear on what you're making as well, because a lot of these projects are built on an idea. And if the idea is not executed how everyone thinks it's going to be executed, that is another red flag that just ruined games. So you have to be very clear on what you are trying to build. Also, I think it's important not to spend the Kickstarter money on yourself. Like, we all have to live, I get that. But if you could reinvest at least 70% of that into promoting the game on Steam or wherever you release the game, you have a lot better chance of success. The games that failed seem to have used the money to help pay the developers to build the game. And yes, developers need to get paid, but it gave them no marketing money. This is Exploding Cats, one of the most successful Kickstarter things, and it's not a game. Well, a computer game. Why was this so successful, and why was this product so successful after it launched? Because they had designed the game. This whole game design, they used the money from Kickstarter to put the game into production. They used the money to build their marketing strategies and all those things, and the game sold millions of copies. That's pretty much the concept you have to look at for an actual video game. You need to have that product pretty much there, ready to go, and then you're using it just to push it into successfulness, to make that game really go from strength to strength. That's where Kickstarter campaigns excel for video games. I like Kickstarter. I like the idea of Kickstarter, but I think if you're an indie developer, it is making your life a lot harder. Thank you for watching.